Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs. But luckily, there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku, and it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
Welcome to Ballot Battleground, Nevada. I'm your host, Ben Marjat, a reporter at KRNV News 4 in Reno. I'm passionate about making politics in this critical battleground state more digestible to the average voter and pushing past the talking points to press politicians for answers. On this show, we take deep dives into the people, ideas, and debates shaping Silver State politics. At the end of August, Nevada government agencies were hit with a crippling ransomware attack. State departments ground to a halt and malicious actors pulled data from the state's network. Thankfully, Nevada's election infrastructure wasn't affected, but against that backdrop and with concern over Nevadans' personal information still fresh, the Department of Justice is now requesting driver's license records and partial Social Security numbers for every registered voter in the state. Secretary of State Cisco Aguilar, Nevada's elections chief, says that data is highly sensitive and confidential. He's refused to hand it over and is raising alarms about how it could be misused. This week, Aguilar joined us to talk through it all, how Nevada's election systems held up during the cyberattack, why he won't release voter data to the Trump administration, and a first look at initiatives that could appear on your 2026 ballot. Here's our conversation with Secretary of State Cisco Aguilar. He's the only University of Arizona graduate that I willingly talk to, but it's my job, so I don't really have a choice.
Thanks,
Secretary
Ben.
of State Cisco Aguilar, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Bear down. Go Cats.
I kid, of course. It's always a pleasure to have you. You've been making the rounds in Reno, doing all the events. You were at the groundbreaking for the GSR Arena last night. You're, of course, you come from the sports world. What was it like being there, seeing potentially some progress on the horizon there?
Well, I'm excited for the PAC team, to have a facility like they're going to have. It'll be pretty phenomenal. The more fan support they have, I think the greater they'll do. And it's exciting to see President Sandoval be able to accomplish a major goal. He loves athletics. He understands the importance of athletics. But again, it's about building community, and hopefully the arena will serve as a voting location in the future as well.
Yeah, I was going to say it was a big opportunity for you guys in Vegas last cycle with Allegiant Stadium. Remind me, how many people voted there? But it was a great success.
Yeah, it was about 4,500 people. And the really exciting thing about it was was a first-time, younger, nonpartisan voter. So the fact that we were able to get them into Allegiant Stadium, to experience what they experienced, to have the excitement that they have, hopefully they become committed to being a regular voter, and that's the intent, to get as many Nevadans as possible to vote, especially those that aren't considering it or thinking about it until the last minute. And Raiders team was phenomenal. They are super passionate about this. Working with people that truly understand it and truly are passionate about it makes things successful. And the Raiders team was incredible, and I'm grateful that the fact that they believe in the community, they understand the state of Nevada, and they want to drive us forward.
Yeah, how pricey it is to get in that building to watch a football game, but you can go for free, get your, I voted Raiders sticker. Those were pretty cool. So a great opportunity down there. But looking ahead, obviously, the main reason we have you in today is to talk about the Trump administration's Department of Justice making some big requests of your office. So let's talk about that. When was the Secretary of State's office first notified that Trump's DOJ wanted a lot of voter information records from you guys? What records specifically did they request?
It's hard to pinpoint the exact moment when you realize what they were requesting or where the communication started. It may have been 3 months ago, but it feels like 9 months ago in a lot of ways because of the fact of how much work we had to do to ensure that we were protecting Nevada voters. They did request information, and when we received the letters, they seemed very logical and very fair when you look at them. But then when you dig down deeper and start to actually think about the implications of what they're asking and why they're asking for it, and the lack of clarity about why they're asking and what they're going to do with it. My job as the chief elections officer in the state of Nevada is to make sure that we are protecting voter data. We are protecting Nevadans. This is not a red or blue issue. This is about Nevadans as a whole, because once you start providing information, you're setting a precedent that you may not be able to fix.
Explain to me the difference between, and to our listeners, the difference between the voter file, which is, the publicly available database of certain information on every single voter in the state, and how this request kind of went beyond that.
Yeah, it was asking for deeper personal information. We did provide all the information that is publicly available. Anybody can go into the system and download this bulk data. Most of the political parties do it on a regular basis, but they were asking for additional information such as last four social security numbers, driver's license numbers, which is personal information. They have not justified why they're asking for it. In the Secretary of State's office, we believe heavily in transparency. And I feel like the federal government isn't being very transparent with us. And it's maybe because they just don't know how they're going to use the data. But I can't have Nevada data sitting out there in a database in the federal government. This administration may have an intended goal, but as administrations change, leadership changes, you don't know where that data is going to go or how it's going to be used. And so it's my job to protect Nevada voters. State law is very clear on what I can release and what I can provide on request. So I'm going to follow state law first until a judge tells me that the federal law allows me to give that information. But right now, the federal law isn't very clear on giving me the authority to provide that information.
The reason that they've said ostensibly, or they've said that, the information will be kept secure under the Privacy Act of 1974, is that something that you just don't believe that at this point, or?
Well, I think the sensitivity of data in general in all agencies across government, both at the local, state, and federal level, yeah, I want to know exactly where it's going to be, how it's going to be used, where it's going to be stored. None of that is very clear right now. And secretaries across this country, both red and blue, have asked the same question. How is the data being used? Where is it being stored? How do we know our voters are going to be protected? What is it that you're going to guarantee to us to make sure that you are doing the right thing on behalf of our citizens?
And it has to do with an executive order from the White House where they want to essentially, via executive order, require proof of citizenship to vote in state elections. How do we square that
I
circle?
think it's important to understand how a person in Nevada registers to vote. First, they have to prove identity, and that's with a photo ID. Then they have to confirm that they are a United States citizen and they are eligible to vote in the state, because if they're not, it's a felony. And we do audits to make sure that people are citizens and that they are duly qualified to vote in this state. We, outside organizations have run cross-checks on our voter data, and there are very few Nevada or non-citizens who are participating in our elections. We recently received a data request from an organization saying that they wanted data on a certain number, and it was 38 voters in the state of Nevada out of 2.1 million registered voters. That tells you that our system is working as intended. There are checks and balances in the process to make sure that we are only allowing eligible voters to vote.
If you were to turn this information over to the federal government, what's your fear? What's the big concern?
My fear is that a group of citizens in Nevada will file suit against me. And I don't want that to happen. My job, I am elected by Nevadans. It's my job to protect Nevadans, and I'm going to do that to the very end.
You told the DOJ you're not going to be sending this information. Where do things stand now?
Well, as you know, there's 8 states across the country who've been sued by a similar response. I'm not sure why Nevada wasn't included in the cool kids, but we are just sitting back doing the job we need to do to start preparing for the 26th election.
Do you have any reason or speculation as to why you guys weren't included in that group? I think Maine, Oregon, a couple other states refused to submit this information. Now they're in court.
I think it's just the fact that we have super qualified lawyers representing Nevada, and maybe they see Nevada as a strength, and knowing where we stand and how aggressive we've been in defending our positions, defending our decisions, maybe they just see it as they're going to try other states at the moment.
Has the governor been involved in this matter at all, or is it separate enough from his duties and responsibilities?
No, I think this is a separate responsibility of the Secretary of State. I do keep him informed. We have had conversations in the past about our voter registration process. Obviously, he's a proponent of the voter ID initiative, which will be on the ballot in 26. We know that 72% of Nevadans approved that in 24. I think initial polling shows that 80% of Nevadans are for that initiative, and we are now starting to think ahead about how do we implement it, ensuring that 28, because this is about the 28 election, we know 28 is going to be a phenomenal opportunity in Nevada for Nevada to have a voice across the country. You're going to have a Republican open primary for president. You're going to have an open primary for Democratic primary candidate. all of those candidates are going to descend on Nevada, trying to earn Nevada's votes. This is a great time for us to show who Nevada is and to get the priorities of Nevada citizens before a future president. So it's making sure that 28 is going to run smooth and it's prepared to handle the scrutiny that we're going to get, but also being sure that Nevadans have a voice in the process.
Last question as it relates to the DOJ's request for voter information. Some people might listen to this and think, the Trump administration has said that they're going to protect this information. Why not hand it over? What's the worst that could happen?
Well, I think, unfortunately, we saw what happened a couple of weeks ago with the cyber attack, and we still don't know the full outcome of the cyber attack. And, the governor's office is taking that lead. They've been working pretty diligently on handling the situation, but we have to be extremely cautious in how we're using people's data, especially in this day and age when a simple click of the button can transfer a lot of information that could have significant impacts on people's lives. We are dealing with a serious situation here. And until somebody can prove to me or make me feel comfortable that I'm not violating state law and that this is mandated by the federal government, and the federal government has to be transparent with Nevadans. They have to be explicitly clear, again, on the use of that data and how they're going to take responsibility for managing that data.
You made the segue for me. We wanted to also talk about the state cyber attack that happened maybe a month or so ago now, where so many state systems were taken down, offline. All these agencies really crippled by this. And I'm sure your office was to a certain extent. But what's important here, were the election systems affected during this cyber attack?
No, they were not. They were secure. Over the last 2.5 years, we've worked really hard to secure those systems. We put in so many rings around the system to prevent a penetration or to prevent somebody taking control, but also ensuring that if they did become hardened, that we had an opportunity to have access to that data moving forward. If we had to run an election through this period of time, we would be able to do it and do a good job.
What made your office and your systems different than all the other agencies in state government?
The fact that Nevada is a battleground state, that makes us a target for bad actors and makes us a target for foreign adversaries. And so we knew we had a responsibility. And also during the 24 election, we reached out to the federal government to ask for assistance on certain systems we were developing. And the lack of response from the administration prior to the 24 election made me realize how much more of a burden and obligation we had to build our own systems of protection. And we did it. We used some of the best vendors in the country. It's like when you have a fire, right? You have to make sure the people showing up to that fire are the most qualified firefighters with the most qualified equipment to create the least amount of damage. And that's my responsibility with systems from a cybersecurity perspective is, do we have the most significant qualified individuals and firms to help us protect our systems? Yes. We have Mandiant, which is one of the greatest organizations in the country when it comes to cybersecurity, helping us design the system, build the system, but also to monitor the system.
Do we know if the attackers tried to get access to the voter database that we have been talking about? Because I can imagine, highly personal information about 2+ million Nevadans is obviously something that a bad actor would try and get access to.
Well, it's not only the election system, it's the corporate filing system and it's our securities regulation systems, right? Because we know that the Secretary of State's office is a target because of the fact that we are the regulators of elections. And so any bad actor is going to try to hurt our office anywhere they can. We actually, the corporate filings team, about a year ago, won a national award for the cybersecurity system they implemented around our corporate filing data. On the security side, that's also secure. The thing is, I have to say in state government, the Secretary of State's office has one of the strongest IT teams. And the head of the IT team is super knowledgeable and super committed to security. And the fact that he is so knowledgeable about it gives us an advantage to be able to build these systems in a way that they are tight and they are secure.
Last year, we completed this kind of years-long transition to the top-down voter registration and information system. Is that to be credited for why this kind of system stood up to this attack?
Absolutely, because if you remember in the original analysis of why we needed the VRAM system, it was the fact that some of our counties across the state had vendors that no longer existed. So the fact that they were vulnerable because they didn't have the most up-to-date technology, they didn't have the most up-to-date fixes from a security perspective, we are now one system that is across the entire state and all 17 counties that is maintained on a daily basis to ensure we are doing what we need to do. The fact that we can monitor it. We also have systems that are constantly monitoring the system to see if somebody's trying to penetrate. And the fact that we do that monitoring for the 17 counties helps us in a great way.
That's interesting because kind of to me as the layperson not in this space directly, you kind of think, if there's one place that has all the information, kind of this centralized database, it might be easier to access, whereas previously the information spread out among the 17 counties, a little more dispersed, that might be more challenging.
Well, that would be true if all the counties had the same resources to invest in that type of system. The fact is a lot of our counties don't have the resources to be able to do that. Clark could definitely do it. Washoe probably could do it. But it's, again, if you could build economies of scale and spread out that cost to have the same protection, the same system, and the same guarantee to know that those systems are secure, you're going to want to go with the most cost-effective way because, again, this is taxpayer money. We want to make sure we're doing the best we can with that money.
This is a question that we probably don't know the answer to, but I'll pose it as a hypothetical. You know, if we were in the old system, the bottom-up voter registration system, do you think that we would have been susceptible and would have lost voter information
I probably
data?
wouldn't have set up for 2 weeks. Just because I would have been, I probably wouldn't have slept for 2 weeks because I was I would have been so concerned that they would have found, they say this, you're only as strong as your weakest link. And that weakest link would have impacted the whole entire state because they would have figured out how to penetrate that weakest link and get to the larger counties and get more of the information that they needed. Recently too, in Texas, they had a vendor who did the work similar to what we do with VRAMs, and that vendor went out of business. And those counties were left struggling. There was a couple counties that were on that system prior to VRAMs. And had that individual or that vendor still been around, we would have had some real serious issues.
Yikes. Any other impacts in terms of, less of a focus for this podcast, but the business side, the corporate filings, all that good stuff, any effects there? And how are you guys kind of still...
the effect that really kind of caught my attention was the loss of revenue. Because of the fact that, yes, our systems were secure and they could function. Somebody could get through the entire process on Silverflume, but when they got to the actual payment processing, it would crash because that's where the state had control. And the fact that the state controlled our payment processing limited us on how many corporations we could actually incorporate that day. And if you look at our revenue numbers, you see a significant drop. What's also a little bit concerning is the fact that we had a lot of transactions taking places throughout the state that needed the system to function. We had a small business in Las Vegas who was closing a transaction. This individual spent decades building his business. And because the system was not functioning because of the credit card payment processing in the phone system, he wasn't potentially going to be able to close his transaction. He reached out to me. I got a text message from him, and we were able to help him manually to get that transaction closed. That is a Nevadan who spent their life building something. They had an opportunity to take advantage of that. And it was great to see him be able to complete the transaction.
Are you guys back up to 100% up and running on all systems yet?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
So we had a big day yesterday in corporate filings. The last 2 days have been significant. We also did something different that most government agencies wouldn't do. We are able to track all the people who tried to file during the cyber attack who weren't able to, and we reached out to them. We emailed them and said, hey, we want you to file in Nevada. Let us know what we can do to help you. If you experienced a late fee because you couldn't file, we'll waive the late fee. And we sent out about 7,000 emails to individuals and folks who were incorporated here in Nevada.
And that's important, right? Because I think you've talked a lot about trying to bring a lot of that business to the state of Nevada. I forget if it was like Delaware or Maine.
It's Delaware.
One of
Delaware
those
is my main
northeastern
target.
states that kind of takes a lot of this business. So, from your perspective, I'm sure you don't want companies to think that Nevada is not the place to do this anymore.
Nevada is the best place for a business to incorporate. We have fair laws. We are very transparent about what our laws are. There's predictability. Our fee structure, I think, is fair compared to Delaware. Look, Delaware makes $2 billion in corporate filing fees. If Nevada can take 5% of that market share, that's $100 million to our state. We're currently about $250 million in corporate filing fees. That's a significant increase, and all that money goes directly to the general fund for the legislature and the governor to determine where to invest it across the state.
Let's switch back to elections here. Looking ahead as we are now to the midterms, what questions will we have on the ballot? What questions have been filed that need to get signatures? Where do we kind of stand with some of these measures?
So we know for sure there is the reproductive rights question that will be on the ballot. We know that there will be the voter ID ballot initiative that will be on there. We had a couple of filings. One is for open primaries, a redistricting commission. Not sure the status of that at the moment, but we know these are going to start coming. And so we have to make sure the team is ready to go.
You were opposed to question 3 in 2024, which was open primaries and ranked choice voting.
I wasn't against open primaries.
Well, that's what I was. Yeah, so I was getting there. Don't worry. You're opposed to ranked choice voting because of the potential confusion that it could have caused voters. Open primaries alone, which is what it appears that Sandra Cosgrove and her group are going for. Where do you stand on that?
I think I was very clear during the legislative session where I stood on that issue. I think the fact that the speaker raised it for a conversation and a discussion in the legislature was a big thing. We know that the largest registered group of Nevadans are nonpartisan. We need to figure out how to get a greater voice into the process. And if we know that nonpartisans are going to continue to grow, we need to ensure that those voices are being heard and that it's just not limited to a certain amount of people. Yes, they have a choice to choose a party and they should choose a party. But I think Nevadans, we're Nevada. We are a purple state. We know we are going to decide the future of this country. And so we want to ensure we have the greatest voices participating in that process.
All right. Secretary of State Cisco Aguilar, thank you so much for making the time in this kind of, it's probably not a downtime for you, but I guess in the period in between election years where there's still a lot of work going on, but where you have a little more time to do things like this.
Thank you for having me. Always glad to be here.
Yeah, well, let's talk to you next year, I'm sure, as we gear up for 2026. You ready?
Sounds good. Let's go. I'm ready.
Another thanks to Cisco Aguilar for coming by the studio to record this week, and a special thank you to our associate producer, Brian Petrus, who helped with research and editorial support. If you made it to the end of this episode, I really appreciate it. If you have guest ideas, episode ideas, questions, comments, compliments, concerns, anything at all, I want to hear from you. Send me an email at bjmargiot, MARGIOTT, at sbgtv.com, and put Ballot Battleground Nevada in the subject line. Also, if you have a minute, I'd really appreciate it if you left a rating and a review. That helps the podcast show up higher in searches so more people can discover the show. Thanks for listening.